Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Richie from Boston. It is the 9th of May in the year 2020, and Dr. Kaufman and myself are both experiencing incredibly winter-like weather here this May in the Northeast. Dr. Kaufman, I appreciate you making time to come back and jump in with me again. What's going on, man?
Well, yeah, it is snowing here, right before Mother's Day. We definitely have that kind of thing go on from time to time. Yeah, it is snowing here, right before Mother's Day. We definitely have that kind of thing go on.
Oh, that was me. I'm sorry. My other computer was up. Go ahead. I'm sorry. We were getting bad bounce back. Start that over again, brother. My bad. You did it last time, so it was my turn this time. So we're good.
Oh, it's still going on in my. Oh, I know. I think I might.
We both did it last time.
I think I might have done it again.
Mute your volume. I muted my volume. We should be good by now. Stand by, people. It's early. Okay, we should be good.
Yeah, no, I think I corrected it too. Okay. Sorry about that. But yeah, no, I mean, it is an eerily wintry day here, the day before Mother's Day. But nonetheless, we press on. And I think we're here really to talk about some of the censorship that's been going on. And we both had videos pulled down and, where we're talking about things that are not really things that should be censored. They're not violating these policies on YouTube that they're talking about, right? We're not harassing people. We're not showing pornography, right? So basically, I've been just talking about scientific papers and government websites for the most part. And this is what they've decided to take down because it threatens what's going on right now.
I've never had this many videos taken down in a week and a half period ever. Usually they just pull your channel. You're looking at everything in red are videos of either me interviewing a doctor, me showing a doctor, or a world specialist explaining their point of view on the coronavirus. You see what I mean? Or where there are, where I'm warning about martial law and troops amassing. Those are the videos they've decided to take down. It just freaks me out that they're leaving the channel up, but they're taking the videos down. We just tried to do a simulcast where Dr. Kaufman and myself were live at the same time. I had it up for about 7 minutes and then it crashed. That's never happened before either. It's not like it's something revolutionary. I've done it before. It's just something about your particular message they don't seem to be digging whatsoever, man. And I showed you this before we went live. I'll see if I can pull it up again. I am a little slow here this morning, folks. I believe this would directly... This right here is basically talking about people like yourself. They're saying, the doctors you're seeing on Facebook and YouTube, those are all unsubstantiated claims. Well, I'm going to say that's not accurate because you were so substantiated that I was just sitting here going, I have no idea what this guy's talking about, but he sounds really smart. If you recall, you know what I mean? You had every single thing. You were the first. You are the reason that myself and about 300,000 other people understand that an exosome and COVID-19 under a microscope, first of all, aren't colorful, three-dimensional looking germs, but they're very, very similar. Do you still stand with that, or have you come up with a new theory?
Well, no, that's absolutely correct that it's very difficult to distinguish exosomes from these so-called virus particles. But, the more I look into it, the more I find flaws in the scientific reasoning. So, for example, I found that they are not using some of the basic rules of experimental design. And these things have been codified in international documents, for example, using a control. So when they mix the lung fluid from these sick individuals with a tissue culture, and that's where they show under the microscope these particles, they don't do the same experiment where they get lung fluid from a healthy person, or where they just add water and then show those images under the microscope. So without that control group to compare to, there's no way to validate their findings. I mean, this is like a basic thing. Even, my son in grade school, when they're teaching the scientific method, they talk about control groups. So the fact that they're not using this right away is a big indicator that you're not looking at real science here.
I showed you this article before we went live. You want to talk about this? Just your opinion. I mean, nothing here is uber critical, but researcher on the verge of making a significant coronavirus finding shot to death. And I read this story last night, and it seems incredibly dubious. It was this were these researchers about to come out with something that would actually correspond with what you've been telling us all along, in your opinion, or have you not seen it yet?
Yeah, no, I am familiar with this, and it seemed that researcher was doing studies related to the genetics of the virus. And of course, I don't. It's impossible to know the details about what happened, but it certainly would seem that he may have been on the brink of publishing or letting out some type of news that would be threatening to the mainstream narrative, and that could have happened. But of course, it's next to impossible to get details on what's going on. It would need some serious investigative journalism.
Indeed.
But this, is not unprecedented because there are many doctors and other alternative health practitioners who have died suspiciously when in the prime of their life or health without explanation, and their families have questioned this. And you can definitely look into this matter. There are several articles about this, and some of these doctors were quite famous, like Nicholas Gonzalez and Andrew Molden. And they were talking about ways to cure cancer, and Dr. Molden was talking about vaccine-related injuries that he had discovered, actually a way to, even back in time, looking at photographs, show that a child was injured by a vaccine by looking at before and after photographs and just using some simple geometry to look at facial symmetry. And so people that come up with narratives based on evidence that severely threaten the mainstream medicine paradigm, especially their profit stream, seem to have untoward health outcomes leading to their death.
I thought it was obvious that people would figure out the sudden amazing jump in autism and Alzheimer's, and if you correlated those next to the amount of vaccines that people were getting right out of the womb, I thought it would be self-evident what the problem was. And it's amazing how anybody that pointed out the obvious was labeled an anti-vaxxer, and they went to the extreme with it. And that was their biggest in this platform. I don't know how familiar you were with this particular genre until this whole thing popped off, or this whole thing happened. But before this, the three things, if you wanted to get videos removed or you wanted your channel taken down, talk about flat earth, talk about 9/11, or talk about vaccines, and you were gone. Well, COVID-19 has gotten rid of the entire anti-vaxxer movement all in one fell swoop. People are demanding a vaccine because if you don't get a vaccine, you can't go back to regular life. This whole thing that they did was brilliant. It was brilliant. People locked themselves in their houses voluntarily. No big deal. And everyone's waiting around for a DNA changing vaccine that Dr. Bill Gates is suddenly building in his lab. And I say Dr.
Well, he certainly acts like a medical authority.
It's just, isn't it funny that this guy was his Bill Gates, and this is his true story. His claim to fame was he was the first person ever to develop a virus for a PC, because they didn't exist. And now we find Bill Gates again in the midst of this. He's going to be the person to save us from a virus all over again. I mean, come on, there's got to be some cosmic comedy going on right there, something dubious. But at any rate, it's still early, Doc, so stand by.
That's okay. Richie, I wanted to also mention that it's not just YouTube that seems to be involved in this, because I actually made an announcement after being censored that I was going to send out a newsletter that was going to give details about, where you could find my interviews and videos, and come up with a plan to have alternative access to this information. And the company that I had signed up with to deliver this newsletter, because you have to go through this because they basically make sure that you're not sending out spam,
right?
So that your emails reach your subscribers. And they just suddenly rejected me with no explanation. They would not take my business.
Well, that means you've made the list. That's so they've decided that this guy's message is good for humanity, so we need to censor him. That's just how it works, man. The more evidence you show, the more you prove that, hey, what you guys are doing are hurting people. It's actually bad for humanity. And here's the proof. Here's the patents. Here's the links. Here's everything out of their own mouth. Everything that you would think you'd need to win in court, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on social media, it's gone. It's gone. And this is how they control the message now. It's amazing, man, but you've made the list. So
yeah, it's almost like something to be
I told you this was
about.
coming. Remember in the beginning, I said, listen, it's coming. It's coming. And here it is. So it's all owned by the same corporations anyways. They own all of these platforms. So you're on BitChute, correct?
Well, I've actually even had trouble there.
Well, yeah, we do too. We do too. It just takes forever, but stay on it. But go ahead.
I actually had 2 videos from there that I did spend the excessive amount of time to upload them, and one of them just disappeared, and the other one stopped playing. So it was still there, but no one could watch it.
Yeah, that's BitChute. They take up to 24 hours to upload a video. It's unbelievably slow. Unbelievably slow. So
well, when I first started, I actually had 2 videos uploading, and it after 3 days they just timed out. That's how long they were processing every time I checked, and I couldn't believe it. But it makes it next to impossible, really, to put any material on there.
And that's the deal. It makes it next to impossible. It's just like people self-isolating. You'll just say, forget it, and you'll censor yourself. I'm not even going to bother putting this video up because it's going to take all day and it still won't happen. That's why BitChute exists. So it's sad. It's sad. Hey, have you had a chance to take a look at this? I came across this a few days ago. I put this up and YouTube was nice enough to take it down. So let's put it up again. It's House Resolution 748. It's the CARES Act. And the strange thing about this is if you look at this, it was sponsored by Representative Joe Courtney. It was introduced on 1/24/2019. It's right there. It's congress.gov. It's not some, made up website. In the first sentence, it talks about this bill responds to COVID-19 outbreak and its impact on the economy, public health, state and local governments, individuals, and businesses. Now, I put this up several days ago. I'm not a doctor, so, dude, how did they put this bill? How did they introduce this bill a year before this came out?
Wow, that's quite incredible. So they had the name worked out and everything.
It's the very first line of the resolution, and like I said, it shows you right here. It was introduced to the floor 1/24/2019. The very first 5 words are, this bill responds to COVID-19. See, now in the beginning, you helped straighten people out on this. A coronavirus is a range of different viruses. COVID-19 is the one that are saying everyone hide in their house, don't go outside, don't look at the sun, don't talk to your neighbors. This one calls it out straight right off the bat, right by name in the first 5 words. This bill responds to the COVID-19, i.e. coronavirus disease 2019 outbreak and its impact on the economy, public health, state and local governments, individuals, and businesses. And then it goes on and on and on and on and on. I'll send this to you. I meant to send this to you, but I did put this up in a video already, and they took it right down.
Wow, that's quite incredible. I mean, this is a full 11 months before the first sign of anything occurred.
By name, everything, not coronavirus, COVID-19.
Right. I mean, well, COVID-19 stands for Coronavirus Disease 2019. And so this, they got the year right, but they planned really in advance, it looks like.
It indeed, because we didn't hear about coronavirus until after event 201. And speaking of that, are you involved in the event 202?
No, I was not involved in that event.
Okay, now for people. I mean, as far as I know, I got a thing saying, Richie, your friend Dr. Kaufman's an agent because he's involved in event 202. I said, event 202 is people like us on the other side. doing like a mockery of their thing, and your picture was prominently there. I don't know who's behind that or whatever, but it isn't the powers that be. It was social alternative media, we'll call it, and they are using your face just for the. I'm assuming for your credentials, but.
Right. Well, there were I did watch some of that testimony, and there were some good people in there who I respect, like Derek Brose, for example, and Mark Devlin. But they initially contacted me like in February when they were starting to organize the event. And I had one or two preliminary emails where I was trying to, find out more information. And then I was just too busy with other things, and I didn't really get involved at all. And I had put out some feelers to people I trust. What do you think about this? And I didn't really hear back anything that anyone else that I respect was getting involved, from the sort of medical and scientific community. So I never followed up. And then the event took place. And but I guess they did. Use the association that I had from the initial contact for promotion purposes or to associate me with the event. I'm not sure. Like I don't feel like I'm big enough to actually attract anyone to anything else. But I certainly appreciated the invitation. But I was not a participant in that.
All right, cool. I just wanted to get that out there because people were trying to make it sound like your intentions were dubious, and they aren't. You've stayed with your message since the beginning. I've had you on like 4 times now. This is the 4th video that I'm sure they're going to take down in a couple of days or today. But fortunately, subscribers have been saving them, so that's phenomenal. You've seen this, and let me see if I can get this up here just to get your opinion on this real quick. I guess this is like a Saturday morning talk show type deal here. Well, because you've already pounded the message out there how many times? I mean, how many more times can you say the same thing? You know what I mean? And these guys still move forward with this. Bill Gates telling everybody we're not going back to normal till we get a vaccine, and regular people seem to be buying this no problem. Anything to go back to normal life. Do you think he's going to make this?
Do I think he's going to make a vaccine?
No, do you think he's going to make this like where everybody wants to get a vaccine? Just give me a vaccine so I can go back to my life.
Well, I think already quite a number of people would be lining up to get it, right? I mean, look, there's been a couple of examples where they were looking for volunteers to do clinical trials, and people stepped right up, seemingly so. And I think, partly it's just the desperation of wanting to get back. And, people trust that vaccines are effective, right? Because that's what we've always been told our whole lives. But perhaps people don't know that the vaccine that they are developing for this issue is not like any of the other vaccines. It doesn't contain some bit or inactivated virus that will stimulate an immune response. It actually contains DNA that they want to insert into your cells and have your cells basically make virus proteins or maybe some other kind of protein, because who knows what they're putting in there. And they certainly haven't isolated any genes from a virus that's related to this pandemic. So it seems to me like this is some kind of genetic engineering that they want to turn us into genetically modified organisms.
Well, that whole theory right there goes back a long way. A very well-respected and kind of iconic YouTube channel, Nicholson 1968, has been talking about the elites wanting to mix the 3rd strand of DNA with humanity. It's biblical. It goes back to pretty much every ancient writing. The 3rd strand of DNA, and it seems like this right here would fulfill that destiny, the mRNA GMO vaccine. It's astounding that this guy is getting this much. I mean, other than the United States of America, the 2nd largest contributor to the World Health Organization is Bill Gates. That's insane. His foundation gives more money to the World Health Organization than the next 10 countries. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I think you could extend that then to say that Bill Gates is in control of YouTube, because the CEO of YouTube made a public statement that they are going to censor and delete any videos that disagree with the World Health Organization's recommendations and stance on the COVID-19. So if Bill Gates is one of the largest contributors, that means he has quite a bit of influence.
Go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so we're basically, I mean, you could say that we're, in a sense, being censored by Bill Gates in doing what we're doing now, because certainly the scientific evidence it goes against what he's saying.
Here's the funny thing: if this is such a world, I mean, this is stating the obvious, but it doesn't. I don't understand why people don't get this. The CDC has been lying about the COVID-19 numbers, the influenza numbers, which we were talking about before we went live. The influenza numbers have went down slightly because they're simply saying that people that died of the flu also died of COVID-19. We've caught them a million different ways from Sunday saying the CDC.gov, right on their own paperwork, if the person died with COVID, say that they died of COVID. Why would they have to lie about this stuff? And why would if it's such a crisis, a worldwide crisis where everything had to be shut down, why are doctors like yourself and nurses, like the first person that ever told me about this COVID-19 being a mild flu, she just lost her job yesterday at a huge hospital in Boston that is flooded with people. She lost her job. I find it strange that medical workers are getting cast out left and right. Is it because they're not going along with the program? Would that be your guess?
No, I think actually, I mean, they may preferentially choose people who are not going along with the program, but the reason that they're laying off workers is because they're losing. They have no revenue. They can't do any of the normal things that they generate all their revenue from, like elective surgeries and having patients in the hospital. I mean, they've closed off all their beds for non-COVID related illness, right? Which is why people are dying at home instead of dying in the hospital right now. So almost all these hospitals are virtually completely empty, right? And there are so many reports of that I've gotten personally from people who have had experiences, right? Like this Australian man whose son had a sports injury and he wanted to take him to get an x-ray, thought he had a broken bone. And he actually had to harass the security to even let him in the hospital for that. And then he walked through the hospital to the radiology department, and there was not one other patient in sight, not one person in the radiology department having any studies. And, you know, hospital radiology departments, they have to spend millions of dollars to buy the equipment, right? Like an MRI machine, a CT machine, all those things are major capital expenditures. And in order to cover the costs and then to hopefully generate profit, which is, you know, hospitals are in the profit business, they have to run those machines around the clock. So pretty much, you know, you could walk into, you know, 6 months ago, you could walk into any hospital radiology department and every machine will be in operation, scanning somebody at any given moment. So to walk into a hospital and see it completely empty, that's just, you know, a major problem for the hospitals. So they are at the point now where they don't have enough money to make payroll. And that's why they have to lay people off. And it's so obvious that it contradicts with the, you know, narrative that we have the biggest pandemic in 100 years, right? And we have to sacrifice our freedoms in order to stay safe. You know, you would think they would need every single healthcare worker. In fact, even I've gotten several emails and text messages from like New York State government because I'm a licensed physician, and they're basically we're asking for anyone who is retired or not in practice or whose license has lapsed, that they would reinstate you and allow you to practice in order to take care of this crisis, right? So how can they say that when they're laying off workers left and right? It's diametrically opposed. So these things are, you know, so obvious. It's really astounding that the general public cannot see through this because this, you know, this material is even covered in the mainstream media. But you have to put two and two together, and you have to know about it and look for it.
Well, they've spent a lot of time making sure people couldn't figure out how to put two and two together without asking their phone first. And I'm not being a dick about that. It's true. We've watched it through the Common Core. We've watched all these agendas playing out to where people are actually really and literally buying this, even though to this day, everything's fine, except for the weather's really kind of messed up. You know what I mean? But she mentioned to me yesterday, she just lost her job yesterday. she mentioned to me that the hospital also got an enormous grant or whatever you call it from the government, but none of the doctors or nurses saw any of it. It just went to the hospital. And driving back into Boston was a trip, because we've all seen the big electronic 1984 signs on the side of the highway. Practice social distancing. Don't text and drive. Don't read signs while you're driving, while you're reading signs while you're driving. In Massachusetts, we've got practice social distancing and practice vehicle distancing. Have you heard that one yet?
Vehicle distancing?
Practice vehicle distancing. I've got it on video.
Oh my
God. I don't
gosh.
even know what that means, but why not throw it in? Why not throw it in? See if people will fall for that one too.
Well, I heard one interesting theory about that would possibly explain that, and which is that the social distancing has nothing to do with contagion or an illness, that it has to do with getting a clear GPS signal so that we could be tracked and not be confused with other individuals. So if you're spacing out the vehicles as well, because we know vehicles don't get viral illnesses, right?
That could change, but yes, I hear you.
So it would still possibly be for that effect, to keep the individuals and their cell phones separated enough so that they could resolve which signals coming from which individual.
I think it might fall into this category right here, because this is California, and Massachusetts has already started this with the contact tracing people. I mean, this one in California was crazy. I don't know if you've read this as of yet.
I've seen the video of Dr. Levin saying what their plan was, and this is something actually that I did predict. I don't think I spoke about it with you, but I knew that there was going to come a time when they're going to be knocking on your door, and that there's a chance they're going to try to take people out of their homes and put them in some kind of quarantine facility. Well, and that's exactly what he said.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that's exactly what he said their plan is to do.
Well, I told people back then, I mean, this is March 31st. The World Health Organization said clearly on March, right at the very beginning of this, that they said that they were going to have to go door to door, that the social distancing and the people locking themselves in worked perfectly. But now they were going to have to go door to door, and people like, that's never going to happen. Well, it's happening. And it's happening specifically in the state that I'm in California. These people aren't messing around. They're going to find out if you're sick, if they have to kill you to do it. You know what I mean?
Well, in California, they said that they were going to hire 20,000 people to basically, track everyone. And I saw a video where they showed one of the want ads for, looking for people to apply to be contact tracers. And they listed that they wanted people with military experience.
Yeah. What goes better than medical and military at the same time? Nothing like infantrymen and military people tracking you down for your own safety. I've watched from the very beginning. I've watched the military guys that they were calling up. Every one of them wore the same MOS that I was, which was infantry. They didn't teach us how to help anybody. It was quite the contrary. They taught us how to kill people really effectively, and that was it. That's exactly what Abbott in Texas called up. And then Trump tied up 1 million. That's still happening right now. He called in 1 million people that just retired from the military. Now, what he did was brilliant, militarily speaking, is anybody that would have been on this side of the fence that just got out of the military, that was still sharp with their skill set, gets called back into the military. And that's it. It was brilliant. So it puts them on the government side. Airborne Saint just said they teach you to kill and break things. He's absolutely right. So it's going to get fun. And this is not over, because the second wave is coming, Doctor. I don't know if you heard about that, but the second wave is coming. It's going to be even more devastating.
Yeah, I'm sure. And, I'm very concerned, too, about people's actual health, because, right now we're in a situation where there's really no evidence that anyone has died above the levels in previous years, right? The most recent statistics on the CDC for the United States is that there's 2% fewer deaths so far this year compared to the average of the last 3 years. But in the, whatever the second wave might be or whatever is coming, and, partly because people have just been, in their homes for so long, right, without sunshine, and probably not taking very good care of themselves. But perhaps they could, do something that would really make a lot of people sick. I mean, I'm definitely concerned that that may happen from the vaccine. But even before then, there are all kinds of things that can be done. And this is something I'm very worried about. And I'm worried about it not only for the health of the people that may be affected, but also that it will serve to incite more fear and convince more people that there really is, some scary new disease. And they won't realize that it's, the powers that be trying to create people being sick.
I agree. You got that, and you tie that together with the pending food shortages. We're already seeing that all over the place, where you can only, if you want to purchase something for your family, you can only get a limited amount, etc. They're setting it all up so that we're going to have to go stand in line, and a soldier's going to hand you food if you have the proper vaccination, if you have the proper seal, if you have the proper whatever.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that actually the meat supply is something that I think is going to be really severely affected. And already I heard from some local friends that many of the grocery stores are out of various cuts of meat, and they've doubled their prices. And I get my meat from a local rancher at the farmer's market, and they are aware of what's going on too, because they basically sent out an email earlier in the week saying that if you're a regular customer, we're going to give you priority and we're going to maintain a supply of meat. But they know that the people, when they can't find it in the grocery store, they're going to go to that market, right? And they're going to try to buy everything out because they're going to rush there. And thankfully, these people are protecting their customer base. But I still, what's that going to mean for everyone else?
Right.
And when you don't have meat, right? So I'm not saying I'm against veganism or vegetarianism. But there are certain nutrients you can only get from meat. And there are many people who really need those specific nutrients and can't be healthy without them. Some people certainly can, for up to pretty long periods of time. But the people who are really sensitive to that and, need those kind of nutrients, they're going to suffer in their health as a result of this.
Okay, I told you that a fellow YouTuber, and he's a much more well-spoken person than myself, Days of Noah, might jump in with a couple of questions. He is here. Your mic is muted, brother. I'm sure you know that.
Oh yeah, I'm here, man. I'm here.
What's up? You got Dr. Kaufman. Ask away, brother.
Hey, man, it's an honor to be here. First off, I want to thank you, Richie, for having me on.
No worries.
It's pretty cool, man, seeing Dr. Kaufman do all this great work, and I'm actually able to be on here with him. It's pretty amazing, man. Yeah, I'm just fascinated by all of this that's been happening over this, so-called crisis. And it's been very eye-opening, especially with all of this new information Dr. Kaufman has been bringing out. It's, I agree, and I could say the same for myself. I'm not very educated in some of these areas, especially regarding biology and just the whole aspect of viruses. But it's information I've never heard. But what I find interesting is how many professionals in the field that are educated in these things aren't speaking against it with any really strong arguments. It almost seems as if they're hiding or running away from all of the points he's bringing forward. And instead of addressing his arguments or trying to refute them, they just try to silence him. And it's just mind blowing because it's so obvious what's going on here. And I think it makes his arguments, or should I just speak directly to you, Doctor? It makes
please do.
It makes your arguments a lot stronger and a lot more effective, simply for the fact that people cannot really refute what you're saying, or even attempt to. It's fascinating.
Well, this is why people resort to ad hominem type of attacks, right? And I've heard people even saying that I'm not even an MD, right? Which is something that's quite easily verifiable. On government websites. So they have to resort to that kind of technique because they perhaps they're not, they're too lazy to look at at what I looked at, or maybe they just looked at it and realized that it's very difficult to refute.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they just seem to be pulling it down. Every video interview, we had about 6 hours together Dr. Kaufman, myself, and they just pulled it all down. And fortunately, a couple of YouTube subscribers and a YouTube channel saved it for me, so we still have it. So I'm going to try to put it back up. But I tried yesterday on my backup channel, and YouTube recognized it right away. This information has been found to violate terms and policies. So what you're saying, Dr. Kaufman, apparently is really pissing off YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, and that will continue. But yeah, David Noah nailed it right there. No one's actually I warned you in the beginning before we ever did this that you were suddenly going to be getting attacked from left and right, and that's not the way they're going with it. They're just ignoring you because they can't refute your evidence. When you teach people like myself that COVID-19, what they're showing as COVID-19 under electron microscope is actually an exosome that's existing in your body, that pissed them off. Because it makes perfect sense. Do you still stand with that? I did ask you that in the beginning. I might have started talking right over you, but
yeah. Well, I know that the way that they're doing the science, they are basically put in the recipe to make exosomes. So you're definitely going to find them if you look, and that's most likely what they're showing. It's possible that they're also just showing cellular debris, but whatever it is, there's no evidence whatsoever that it comes from any source outside of our body.
Right. These viruses to this day have never been proven to cause to make anyone sick. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, I would agree with that.
We've said this in the very, very beginning, but just to reiterate, you told me that you just had a live stream with the two authors that wrote that 800+ page book that explains how people can or can't get sick and how a medicine has never actually cured anything. Do you agree with the information they put out? Because they've cited everything. It's not just their opinion.
Yeah, so you're talking about David Parker and Dawn Lester, and my interview with them about germ theory is actually one of the interviews that was deleted off YouTube. So, but yeah, they've done extensive research, and I've done similar research independently, and we both arrived at the same conclusion. And, you know, there are several other people who have arrived at that conclusion, but very few of them with, you know, the credentials that you know, people might say are the right credentials, right? Like, I know my MD means quite a bit, but I have to acknowledge that like Dawn and David and other people like them, they've done extensive research, and they have the same level of understanding that someone with my credentials would have, but they're, you know, perhaps not taken quite as seriously because of that. But yeah, absolutely, they've you know, there's really no evidence whatsoever that's conclusive about any virus causing disease.
You did an interview with Dr. Tenpenny, and I've had her on separately. How did you think that went?
Yeah, I think it went really well. And Dr. Tenpenny, you know, comes from a background where she's really done most of her research on vaccines, but she was very astute, and she recognized very early on that the policy measures with the lockdown and the financial shutdown did not make any sense, given what the evidence was showing about the seriousness of, you know, a potential new disease. But after we spoke further, I think she really realized how fragile and unscientific the whole virus dogma is. And, you know, I think that we're in quite a bit of agreement about everything at this point.
I find it strange that Dr. Tenpenny, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, all their interviews are getting pulled off of YouTube, and then conversely, Dr. Shiva and Dr. Buttar are being allowed. These are two doctors that I kind of refuted right off the get-go, just based on how YouTube and Facebook were promoting them. It's an easy thing to see. I know you probably don't want to say anything, you know, bad about any fellow colleagues or whatever, but I just can't help but notice that YouTube definitely, they'll shut you right down. They won't refute you. They won't have anyone argue. They won't have anyone call you out for your credentials. They'll just make you disappear. And then on the other hand, we have these guys they're going viral. It doesn't work like that, man. It just does not work like that.
It's true. I've been a little concerned with hearing all of this Buttar stuff everywhere. It's going viral, literally, and it just seems a bit fishy to me. I don't think he's telling the full story. He also really supports mass testing, and I think Shiva had a whole plan for this. He's like, we just need to test everybody, and I think that's a red flag right there, wouldn't you say, doctor? Especially the fact that they're using PCR tests, which aren't very reliable to begin with, and they're creating policy around unreliable tests. I just don't understand how this is getting over. It really makes no logical sense at all, and there's professionals behind this. These are intelligent, educated people. How is this possible?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes as a medical doctor, you can sort of have one foot in each world, right? One foot in the mainstream medical world and one foot in this world of truth that we're talking about here. And it's very, very difficult to step fully out because you give up quite a bit. And, that there's a conflict there that occurs with that. And I think each individual has to resolve that for themselves. But I mean, clearly the testing is been made a mockery of recently by the president of Tanzania, right, who showed that a piece of fruit had a positive test. And that really confirms what I've been saying from the beginning, that, even if you assume that a PCR test is infallible, right, which it clearly is not, as you point out, the genetic sequence that's being measured by this PCR test is from unknown origin. It's not from a virus. If it was from a virus, the way that they would obtain the sample would be to purify the virus so that it is the only thing present in the test tube. And then they could extract the genetic material from that. And that's the only way to show where the source of the RNA comes from. And that's never been done. With the antibody test, it's even more spurious. In fact, the FDA just put out a new guidance this week saying that they're gonna require more strict testing of the antibody tests because they've been wildly inaccurate. And they even said in there that they were not even supposed to be used for diagnosis. So I don't know what the heck else you would use them for, but that's how they've been used for diagnosis. And so if you just look at what the FDA and the CDC says, if you look carefully, they'll tell you that these tests are not accurate. So if you increase access to testing with a test that's not accurate, then it's not going to give you any useful information.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. That's my same argument. And I don't understand how this is getting over. They're creating policy. Recently, Fresno has come out with this contact tracing method. And it's literally just barging into people's homes and pointing people out who possibly could be sick and removing them all over this so-called test. I mean, anyone could come up with a positive test and immediately you are subject to whatever they want to do with you. And it's pretty alarming, especially when there's no science behind this. I'm just flabbergasted by the whole thing, honestly.
Well, it's interesting. You made me think of that the test is being used somewhat strategically to inflate the number of COVID deaths. So, for example, when you have an individual who dies and they have symptoms that are consistent with the COVID, they just put it down on the death certificate as COVID is the cause of death, and they don't do a test, right? Unless if they've already been tested, that's one thing. But if there's no test and they die of something suspicious for COVID, right? They gave specific instructions not to perform a postmortem test because they basically say, well, we already know it was COVID. However, in the other circumstance where someone dies of something unrelated to COVID symptoms, in that case, they say you should do a test postmortem. And if that test comes up positive, then you should change the death certificate to put COVID as the cause of death. So they're basically trying to use it to maximize, the number of COVID-related deaths in that sense.
So you're saying that?
Yeah. Wow. Sorry, Rich. That's so obviously happening, and it's so suspect, and it's criminal. And the fact that more people aren't coming out and speaking against this is just amazing to me. I don't see how this can continue. I just really don't.
Yeah, I agree. And, as time goes on, I really feel much more like a lone wolf in what I'm saying, because I know there are other doctors out there who agree with me, but they are not comfortable speaking publicly about it the way I am. And then there are some doctors that we were in quite a bit of agreement in the recent past, and they seem to be diverging and talking about things that I don't find any scientific merit for that are, like this narrative about that there's some kind of engineered virus is, very destructive and dangerous in my opinion, because it certainly creates even more fear than the current situation, and it creates a justification for more extreme policies and perhaps even military action, either domestically or with other countries, right? And I wonder if that's actually part of this overall strategy. But I certainly don't see any evidence whatsoever of any engineered virus or bioweapon that is being deployed or resulting in any kind of illness or deaths whatsoever.
See, I agree with that, because I mean, if the truth community was 100%, 35% of the truth community believes that this is somehow a bioweapon pushed by China, and Donald Trump is actually helping that along by calling it the China flu. So I find that strange. Now, originally, before I spoke with you, actually, not even before I spoke with you, when I first heard you speak on Crow 777's YouTube channel, you had mentioned that you cannot get a virus airborne, and I thought the exact opposite of that. I figured if this entire thing didn't work out, they'd simply spray a small section of the United States, and if everyone would see everyone getting incredibly sick, and they'd say, "See, now lock in your house, wait for the vaccine, and everything will be well." But then I looked it up, and everything that you were saying, you can find, or you can't find in medical journals.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? The proof is in the pudding. Dr. Fauci wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine that this thing had a 0.01% death rate. You are right about that too, actually. I said 0.9, my bad.
Yeah, 1 in 1,000.
How come that doesn't matter? It's not like he wrote it in the National Enquirer. He wrote it in the New England Journal of Medicine. That's kind of prestigious, no?
Absolutely. It's the top U.S. medical journal. And, what about the 2 doctors from California that they had an estimate for California of that the death rate was 0.03%, right? Even much lower than what Dr. Fauci said. And, they got extremely censored.
Well, I don't know what the next turn is going to be, but there will be another event. They have to do something to get. Too many people are saying it. What pisses me off is that out of all the people I've met being on the road for 3 months, everybody was pretty much down with it. Everybody's wearing their mask, or, you got to do this because the government said, you got to do that. But nobody was actually pissed off. Like, I can't believe they're pulling this. Nobody's outraged. I mean, there's just a small group of us, a small section that actually see this for what it is, but nobody's literally outraged that they just brought the entire world to a stop, and they're basically pulling the strings on everyone. Now that people are finally saying, hey, I just want to go back to work and pay taxes again. That's the outrage. I want to go back to work and pay taxes and get back on the treadmill again. They're going to have another wave, and they've been prepping people for this for quite a while. A second wave is coming. What do you think they could possibly pull to do that? Just more bogus numbers again?
Yeah, well, I mean, it worked so well the first time, so why change the game plan, right? So I think that's the strongest possibility. But what you were saying about they could go around and spray poisons in the air and make people sick if they wanted to.
See, that's an act. That's kind of what I said. They could spray poison and say, look, that's an influenza strain. Yeah. Because who would know? You can spray things like anthrax and nerve gases and stuff like that. I've seen that. I mean, that's real. But it's not a flu. It's not a virus. But it would give the same result. People would see a bunch of dead people everywhere. You know what I mean?
Exactly. They could poison us if they really wanted to. If they really wanted to do something, they could easily do this. Like, bioweapons are, I'm sure they have tons of ideas and things set up that they've been working on for decades now. If they really wanted to take people out, they could very easily do it. That's why it's interesting how they do all of this psyop, psychological warfare type of stuff. It's just really interesting because you think about all of the countries around the world that aren't really affected as bad, or at least aren't really dealing with much regarding this alleged virus yet. The American country is completely being toppled. This is like a controlled demolition. We're experiencing the falling of all of our institutions, all of our industries. We were talking about meat. So we have our food source is in jeopardy here. And we haven't even discussed the psychological effect of this. Dr. Kaufman, I understand you're a psychiatrist. I've studied psychology for about 25 years now. I came from well, I did my undergrad at UC Berkeley,
Ah,
and
that's
and
what. Let me jump in. I said,
sure.
I said, Dr. Kaufman, we're going to have somebody called Days of Noah jump in. I said, I think he's an author or something like that. He's really smart, so he'll ask better questions than I will. So there it is. There it is.
I'm working on my first book,
There
but
you go. All right, my bad. Go ahead. I digress.
Sure. But it's just interesting to me how the psychological effects of all of this aren't really being considered now. There has been some news articles saying, regarding mental illness and saying there's an impact, but I think it's a lot more severe than normal people and the media are willing to address. This is I'm saying, this is my point of view. I believe this is going to create a ripple effect that will last generations, especially the fact that the way children are being treated right now, going through, especially children in the rapprochement stage, children that are going through these individuation stages, that are trying to transfer into their self, and they're having to deal with all of this trauma, especially the behavior of their parents, and this conflict that's happening between child and parent during this time is creating mass trauma that will, I believe, on a mass scale, affect many individuals psychologically and create different types of intracyclical trauma. So basically, we're going to be seeing a large cases of mental illness down the road, and I think a lot of it will be seen through affect issues, right? Different type of social cue issues, insecurity, codependency. I think all of these things are going to rapidly increase over the next several decades, and it's alarming because this type of trauma, it directly affects the human being in this kind of way. It's absolutely contradictory to interpersonal relations.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know that trauma is really the way to affect people via mind control, right? Because you create a situation of desperation and where the survival instincts kick in, and then there are different reactions to trauma, right? And there's the typical fight or flight reaction that we're told about, but there's actually another type of response called tend and befriend, right? And this is related to Stockholm syndrome, where you basically try to ingratiate yourself to your captor or your traumatizer in order to get on their good side so that they treat you better. And I think this is what many people are experiencing now in terms of how they look at the government, who is the ones traumatizing them. But you bring up so many good points, and I think about young children and even infants right now who they rely heavily on looking at facial expressions, right? This is how
Yes.
a baby and a mother bond, right? Because they can understand that because there's so many different muscles in our face to allow us to have all these different expressions, right? And you know that when you see a certain look on someone's face, you know exactly what they're thinking. And right now we're being prohibited from seeing this because of the face coverings. And so you take this baby out into public and everyone's face is covered. And how is that going to affect their ability to socialize and read people? They're not going to be able to. And people are hiding all sorts of things. And they're ashamed of this. Over and over again, I see people are avoiding eye contact. They don't say hello in the pleasant ways that they did in the past. And I'm going around because I'm like in the grocery store, the only person not wearing a mask, pretty much. I haven't seen another person like that. And I'm trying to make eye contact with every single person to see, are you going to acknowledge me that I'm here? Can we smile at each other and say hello? But even if they were smiling, I would have to look at their eyes, and maybe I could pick it up because you just can't tell. So this kind of alienation of people from each other is going to totally change us. It's going to have consequences that are really hard to predict, but it's going to be profound.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And this has been something I've been really focusing on. And you bring up a really good point about the infancy and seeing the face. I did a whole video on this, actually. It was called Mask On, Mask Off. And that's exactly what I was discussing. The fact that this is creating some serious damage between mother and child, especially infant and mother. When the child cannot see the face of the mother, there's many experiments that prove children, or should I say newborns, their development slips. Everything slows down. They begin to regress, or they never develop at all. Even to their motor abilities fall away when they're not given attention, when they're not being seen. A child has to be seen, because to an infant, as you know, when they're not seen, it's almost as if they die, right? So imagine this happening across the earth. Imagine the generations of babies that are going to be experiencing this type of relationship due to the anxiety, because um, Winnicott speaks a lot about this. Henry Stack Sullivan speaks a lot about this, the idea of anxiety in the mother, and during infancy, if it's not a good enough mother in a good enough environment with proper holding, the baby will begin to suffer from trauma, and already in its infancy begin to experience what it is to have anxiety. And imagine an entire generation of babies that are going through this because of this situation, this incident, where the mothers are just anxious. They're scared themselves because they don't want to get the baby sick. They won't want to get their family sick, so they're staying away from the baby. Imagine a 2-year-old, 3-year-old that's in its rapprochement, trying to individuate, and needs the mother. They're kind of afraid. They need that attention. They need that closeness, and the mother's pushing the child away. The mother's wearing masks around the child. The child can't see the mother's expressions, the mother's face. When this detachment happens during these ages, whether it be infancy or toddlers, during the time of say from newborn to around 4 years old, emotions are so important. Intimacy, empathy, all of these things are created during this process. And what I see with this crisis is there's this detachment, there's this separation that's occurring here, a forced separation. They're splitting up families. They're telling grandparents to stay away from their grandchildren now, with a mass scale operation like this going on. I truly believe that generations of young people will grow up to have a lot of ailments and illnesses that we, on a level that we haven't seen yet. So I don't know. It's concerning, and it's disturbing, because it's a completely different situation that people aren't necessarily prepared for. They think this is going to be over soon. We'll get back to normal, but they don't realize babies and children are going through this, and it's going to follow them till their adulthood. They won't forget about this. This is imprinting something within them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made me think about what's known as object permanence. And this is what the game Peekaboo is based upon, right? Because when infants are really young, up until I think it's about 2 years, if an object disappears in front of them, they think it's gone, right? And that's why then when you reappear in the Peekaboo game, it's entertaining, because it looks like you disappeared and came back like a magic trick, right? Because they can't. Yeah, there you go. And so when you have the mother's face covered with a mask, it's that baby is going to feel as if they're abandoned by the mother. And I've worked with a lot of traumatized teenagers and adults, and I'll tell you that abandonment is one of the most severe types of experiences that can cause subsequent emotional problems. And that's exactly what we're headed for all these children in their critical stages of development, who, their mother withdraws affection from them because they're afraid to spread an illness. They cover their face in the presence of the child, and the child feels abandoned.
Absolutely. And the child doesn't understand what's going on. They're not cognitively developed enough to really grasp why she's behaving in this way. So to the child, it's going to be terror. It's going to be pure terror.
I can't help but notice the fact that, I'm sure this is happening in New York because it's happening in Boston. If you don't wear a mask, you've got people that are ready to call a tip line to tell on you, and there's a $300 fine in Massachusetts for not wearing a mask. So wearing a mask is doing everything that you just spoke about. It's not only are they socially distancing people from each other, they don't even want to see facial expressions. I also believe that it plays into the AI's recognition, even though I know that AI can track you from above, which is what it does in the military. But you're also breathing. The body is an incredibly well-made machine that they've been trying to replicate forever. Every time you breathe out, you're exhaling toxins, and then you're allegedly breathing in fresh air, which is hard to come by. If you're wearing a mask, you're just recycling bad air, correct?
Yeah, well, you're right about the detoxification, and your lungs are one of the major organs to, get things out of your body that it doesn't want. And so every time you breathe out, some of these things are coming out. And when you're wearing the mask, anything that's a particulate or sticky is just going to be stuck in that mask. And then when you breathe in again, you're going to basically breathe the same stuff back in, right? It's just like imagine if you breathe into a balloon and without taking any fresh air, after a short period of time, you're going to lose consciousness. And we're essentially doing that in a slow manner by wearing these masks. Plus they just restrict the amount of airflow in general. And many of the masks people are wearing are not made for this purpose in the first place. So they've never been tested for this purpose. And, there's nothing that they're going to do that's helpful in terms of your health, but what they are for another purpose, like we've been talking about, to separate people from each other and to, I didn't mention this other emotional thing, but there's shame that is associated with this. When you hide your face, that's an expression of shame. So I've seen this many times among people that I work with who are riddled by shame, and it's caused them major psychological distress. And oftentimes they present themselves in a way to cover up their face, right, out of the shame. So we're doing reverse engineering that through wearing these masks, that we're creating the appearance of a shameful person, and then you're going to start to feel that shame yourself over time.
This is totally crazy. How could you? So one of the questions that went through quite a while ago was, how can you get this kind of information to your family doctor? And somebody else said, how is it that every lab is in on this if there isn't such thing as a virus? Well, that's pretty easy. When I put that question up, I showed the CDC. This didn't all just happen overnight. This all started with the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds taking over the medical industry, replacing medical school with pharmaceutical school. I mean, this was not an overnight thing. This has been a long, slow process, and it's finally culminated with this. Any doctor that's willing to stand up and actually give information, they either flip them, where they suddenly start talking about something different than they did originally, or they silence them, like we're seeing with you. And somebody had mentioned that you went from the Royal Rife process to exosomes. When you started with me, I think I was the second person to have you on YouTube after Crow. You came right out of the gate with the exosomes and the COVID-19 and showing the clips. I mean, you sent them to me. So, I mean, do you want to speak on that at all?
Well, I'm not really sure how those things conflict with each other. I certainly have talked about Royal Rife and his microscope and how he has used his techniques to cure illness in the past. And he was another person who was silenced, right, when his laboratory was raided and his microscope was destroyed, and no one has ever been able to recreate that technology to this day, although they have found some alternative technology to try and approximate it. So I'm not sure how that's incompatible, but basically what I was saying about the exosomes mostly is that what is being shown as a virus particle may very well be an exosome, and there's certainly no proof that it's a virus.
Now, am I saying this properly? What they're showing as COVID-19, you showed them side by side. It wasn't just supposition on your part. You showed them side by side. The exosome is actually something that's in your body to get rid of toxins. It's actually something helpful, and they're trying to tell us that it is COVID-19. Am I saying that correctly? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, no, that's the photographic proof that they're using is basically showing an exosome or something that originates from our own cells, right, or from the cells that they're using in the culture of the experiment, but doesn't come from outside of an organism in an invasive way to cause disease. So you're exactly right.
Well, I'm just repeating what you told me. I'm just trying to make sure I'm repeating it properly. I'm not exactly right. I just have smart people come on. And speaking of that, Days or No, you got anything else? Because we're getting ready to wrap this up.
Nothing that I could speak about
Have
in
at
a
it, brother.
couple of
We're in
minutes,
no rush, man.
no, I'm just happy to be here, man. It's an honor and it's awesome to hear Dr. Kaufman speak on more of these issues. And I'm looking forward to the future. I'm trying to be as optimistic as possible. I agree with you on a lot of as far as a lot of the directions all of this is going, especially chipping and IDing, vaccines. I get an idea of where this is going, but I am a bit optimistic. I believe they'll fail. I personally believe their evil ways will cause them to turn on themselves in a sense. I This is just my view. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic about it,
I don't
but
think there's anything wrong with being overly optimistic, man.
it's just I can't see how this can continue. People are gonna wake up here. Hopefully, we'll
That's
see
what I keep
how it
thinking.
turns out.
That's what I keep thinking, but we're seeing the opposite.
Yeah.
All right, real quick, both
Sure.
of you. What do you guys think of this Lucifer A's, or however you pronounce it? This right here. They're using it in the chip that's made out of, what is it? It's made out of sugar and something else, and it melts into your body. I did a video on it. I can't think of the name.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I did a video, and then
ID 2020, is that it?
It's close to ID 2020. ID 2020 is a biometric, which I think is much more. It's much different than what we originally thought was going to be the RFID that would go under your skin. If you wanted to get the RFID out, you could just simply cut it out. But a biometric goes into your skin, and that's the thing. That's the mRNA. Is that correct? That's the thing that's going to try to change your existing DNA to help you fight viruses.
You talking about the vaccine?
Yes, the quantum dot. The quantum dot is the thing that uses the bioluminescence like fireflies, jellyfish have, and it's going to allow them to see if you've got the vaccine or not. This is what got me started on this entire thing back in January, when I saw Bill Gates and MIT came together to make a device that could remotely tell if someone had their vaccine. The obvious and only answer was they're going to pull a pandemic. And then, dude, within weeks, they pulled the pandemic. That particular quantum dot tattoo uses this compound that's called Lucifer ASE. I don't know how you properly pronunciate it, but
Wow.
Yeah,
well, dude, it's
Lucifer
everything. His patent WO 2020 060606. That's Bill Gates. I mean, come on, you can't make this stuff up. Everything has biblical tones to it, and everything has the mark of the beast built into it. It's like they're not hiding it; they don't care.
It's just beginning stage transhumanism. It is the days of Noah. We are seeing them meddle with the DNA. Elon Musk is now saying this is just a practice run for future viruses. So there's going to be more viruses down the line. It's just biowarfare in a sense that they're going to use biology and biometrics and all things biological to control the world. I believe it's much bigger than climate in my sense. I understand climate change and this hyper conservationism is taking over and becoming a big thing. But I think at the end of the day, it's really about genetics. It's really about genes. This can go all the way back to the eugenic programs that started in California. I think it really comes down to genetics and creating. Paul Virilio talks about the genetic bomb, which is the last stage. And I agree with his perspective on this. I think the last stage is controlling the human genome.
Yeah, so some people refer to this as like medical technocracy, right? Where it's the guiding principle related to, the cover of our health, but it's really about changing the biology. And, I think you make a good point about the global warming myth, but I think that's very significant in a biological term as well, because CO2 is what we exhale. Right. So we're basically saying that what our bodies produce as they are now is causing our planet to die. And this is a rationale for changing our biology to one that is more akin to what they want, but under the guise of that we're improving the health of our planet.
Absolutely.
I can't help but notice that this entire shutdown of the planet also checks off all the boxes in the global warming wish list. The planes are out of the skies. Cars aren't driving. People aren't outside. Everyone's exhaling as minimal amount of that deadly CO2 as they possibly can because everyone's wearing a mask now.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it amazed me when they came out and said that CO2 is bad for the planet. And I'm like, if I remember correctly, there was a thing called photosynthesis in science class when I was in 5th grade where we breathe it out, trees breathe it in, and repeat, and repeat. And they suddenly told everyone that CO2 was the bad guy.
Well,
and Days of Noah is right. This is the new terrorism. We don't even need a guy in a cave anymore. We've got invisible viruses floating around at all times.
Yes. Phantom menace.
Yeah. Richie, I think this carbon dioxide thing has actually been ingrained in us through our education because, I saw this interview. It was actually talking about a survey, and this was right after I graduated MIT, and I got a degree in biology, right? So I should understand a little something about photosynthesis and carbon dioxide. But they went around and found like students from college in Boston, and they were asking them, what do plants eat, right? And because they wanted to see what's their level of understanding about plant biology. And everyone was saying things like, oh, plants eat minerals from the soil, they eat sunlight, right? And some people might have even said water. But none of those things are the food source for plants. The food source for plants is carbon dioxide. That's their source of carbon. We're all creatures made of carbon, right? And so how did these people who studied biology, including plant biology, and even myself, I didn't answer that question correctly at first, but that made me really, really think carefully about my education and what I really learned and what's really true. And that's such a profound thing, because if you don't realize that CO2 is actually plant food, and that when the CO2 is too low in the atmosphere, plants cannot grow successfully. And, even if you run a greenhouse, right, a commercial greenhouse, you're actually going to add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere to increase the growth and yield of those crops you're growing, because that's what plants need. And so if we have a situation where our CO2 is higher, we're going to actually have an easier time growing food. The rainforests that have been cut down are going to regenerate much quicker. So this is to be beneficial for our planet.
Wow.
I'm so glad you said that, because I mean, their main reasoning for cutting down rainforests is so they can plant soy products, so they can make more hamburgers at McDonald's and Wendy's and all these other places. And don't it doesn't escape my attention that these guys, right before this entire thing blew up, all the major fast food places were suddenly offering wonderful burgers that were made out of not meat. And then suddenly Wendy's is running out of meat because they can't find it it's just insane.
And they want to get
obvious.
They want to get rid of cows because of a methane flatulence, right?
Well, cows
that's the deal now.
Destroy the planet. Everyone knows that.
So we should just eat some modified Franken food instead. That's going to give us all types of diseases and cancers and other illnesses. That's smart. Yeah.
I mean, do we really think that what animals normally produce in nature is going to be harmful for us?
Well, that's the new norm. That's the new norm. Us exhaling is somehow killing the earth. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Isn't it contradictory how they'll make that argument that we're parasites, right? We're causing the earth to die, and we need to be pretty much pushed to the side, and we need to be focusing on making nature the focus. But at the same time, they're saying we're one, we're all connected, right? It's the whole oneness, Gaia kind of perspective. We're one, we're part of the earth. It's weird how they have this contradictory approach to it. It's like at one point we're all one, we're all part of the earth, and then the next point we're not. We're like some parasite that doesn't belong on the planet.
Right. And it's working. It's amazing how many people will grab that and run with it. And it's like, do you understand that you're asking for your own extermination, or you're championing for your own extermination? It makes no sense. But this is the world we live in. This is the world where they can pull off what they're pulling off right now. It's just amazing. At any rate. Oh, speaking of one thing, it just dawned on me driving into Boston the other day. All the billboards, all the propaganda, MIT's right there. What an amazing school. But I can't help but notice that MIT has Darwin carved in stone on one of the sides of the building. That just bums me out. But driving into the Boston, there's a huge billboard, and it shows government and corporations, and it says, "We're all in this together." Now, people look at that and go, "That's right, humanity, we're all in this together." No, that's them telling you, the government and corporations, we're all in this together. That's
Yep.
how we shut down the whole world.
Yep. We're all in this together, but we're snitching on each other, right? Makes a lot of sense.
To America.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, Doc.
Oh, I just want to kind of also try to give a message of hope to people out there, because, you know, I keep coming back to this announcement by Governor Cuomo of New York, who said basically that all of these measures are voluntary and that there's no way the government can enforce it. And he said this, you know, right out in a press conference out in the open. And I see that it's only gotten a few hundred views on YouTube, which is quite incredible. But this is what we should take the instructions from this statement and do what I've been doing, which is simply not follow any of these mandates at all. They're totally unnecessary. And if we just simply make a decision that we're not going to wear a mask, we're not going to stay at home. You know, I really encourage people with businesses to consider opening their business back up. And I'll be the first customer. And there was a clothing shop in Manhattan that did this and has been successful so far, to my knowledge. And all we have to do is just make a decision that we're no longer going to follow this plan because we can see through it, that no one's going to stop us. And that's the way that we can really change things for the better. And I see that we're not going to return to the old normal, but I see that as quite a positive thing. I want the new normal to be much better without the tyranny that we faced before this crisis started, and certainly without any further tyranny that they're trying to increase right now.
I agree. The woman that opened up her hair salon in California did end up in front of a court, but it all worked out well because she got sentenced with 7 days in jail, which I've done jail time. 7 days is just it's a little rest and relaxation, no big deal. But it was a long time ago. They ended up letting her out. They let her out. The governor paid the fine, and she ended up getting $500,000 from a GoFundMe. It worked out. The judge, with his mask on, tried to sentence her, and it all backfired. All of this is unconstitutional. It's against the Bill of Rights, blah, blah, blah. But it's all about compliance. If people don't do it, I've been driving around ever since this whole thing happened. I've been acting like it hasn't happened in my regular life. As far as what I'm saying on YouTube is, I'm just telling you the facts, but I'm still driving around. I'm still meeting people. You know what I mean? It is crazy. The highway's empty.
Yeah, I agree. I think you both are really hitting the nail on the head there. You know, they use this mantra as well, power in numbers, right? We're all in it together, power in numbers. And what's interesting is they are right. We do have power in numbers, but it's real power when we're using our power to fight against them, right? If we all came together and used that power in numbers to understand that, you know, we're in charge here. We actually run all of the industries if we would realize it. And it's basically, we can no longer trust the experts. I think it's come to the point where these large organized institutions and industries can no longer be trusted. And a lot of us have known this for some time, but I think it's gotten to the point now where, especially regarding our health, right, our nature, I think we can rely on nature. I think we can just back away from all of their recommendations and all of their offerings and just handle our nature on our own based on the laws of nature. Now, there's certain things we're going to have to rely on them for, like technological things, software. You know, you got to rely on your mechanic to fix your car, these types of things. But when it comes to my body, when it comes to things that are as natural and normal and human as viruses or illnesses, I think we can let nature take its course and follow the ways of living that we've been following for thousands and thousands of years, and say no to this transhumanist, new age, futurist style of medical martial law. I think if we all just backed off of it and said, stay away from me, keep your hands off of me, I think we'd have a lot more influence.
Hey, Dr. Kaufman, real quick, when's the last time you took a vaccine?
I think it was when I was in my 20s, and actually I was working for the CDC, and they required a hepatitis B vaccine.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's funny how people he's Dr. Kaufman. I watch the comments. I try. And I mean, you got 5,000 people watching, so there's a lot of, trolls or whatever in there. And Dr. Kaufman's for vaccines. Yeah, clearly you haven't been listening, but.
Well, listen, I have a lot of regrets about some decisions I made when I was younger. And I did, believe in the dogma of vaccines because that's all that I was told. And, I was questioning some things, but I didn't go there until later on. But as soon as I actually did my own research to look into vaccines, I immediately decided that there was not going to be one other vaccine injected into me or my family. And I've stuck to that since that time, and that's not going to change whatsoever. And in fact, in my natural healing consultation, one of the things that I really try to focus on is helping people who have been injured by vaccines. So I'm very sympathetic to this issue, and I feel for me personally in my career, it's a major priority. And I'll never be rolling up my sleeve for any kind of injection.
I agree. I wanted you to get that on video, so that way there was no two ways about it. All right, guys. Days of Noah, Dr. Kaufman. You guys should probably hook up and do your own live stream because Noah's got a lot of good questions and information, and always has. So
thank you, Rich. It'd be awesome. I'd love that.
Well,
yeah, please let's talk further.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you, man. I'll have you on one of my shows for sure. It'd be fun.
All right, guys. That's it. Let's shut this down. I'm losing my voice. I need some water. Richie from Boston, Dr. Andrew Kaufman, and Days of Noah, Saturday morning. And we are out. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.